Hello, I'm Kate Bartlett, and this is my presentation for English 6830, Dr. Harris-Fain's vampire novel class. This is my presentation on the novel and genre study of Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter. It's a fantasy alternate history genre. So this has been an interesting read. It is a very fast-paced, action-packed novel that is written in the style of a biography. Really the reader would feel that the author, Seth Grahame-Smith, is doing a true, genuine biography of Abraham Lincoln. It starts in his early life. It includes journal entries, real excerpts from Lincoln's journals, true life events. It includes citations and footnotes, so very scholarly feeling as you're reading. However, we reach a turning point in the plot where Abraham Lincoln vows to kill every vampire in America, and he sets out on a personal vendetta throughout his life, including throughout his presidency and his impact, of course, on American history, all in the backdrop of evil vampires lurking the U.S. So this has been really interesting to read. Like I said, fast-paced, action-packed, and a really interesting blend. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, is kind of the different genres that this kind of fits into and how it doesn't perfectly fit into any specific genre, but rather is kind of a blend of a couple different things. So first I want to talk about kind of why Abraham Lincoln. There are a lot of different ways to kind of look at what's gone on in the past and all kinds of interesting things that have happened, of course, in our country's short history. But Lincoln is, one of the most famous figures, most beloved presidents of our time. He's hugely instrumental in abolishing slavery, of course, with the American Civil War, and just left an incredible legacy. And so during the time where this novel, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter, was written, it was right around the 200th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. And in an interview with The Telegraph, Grahame-Smith is talking to the interviewer about why he chose to kind of go in this direction. So he's discussing that, during this time, around 2009, Lincoln was everywhere on TV, different PBS specials. There were new biographies released about him. And this is in the height of the Twilight phenomenon. So he said he was in a bookstore and he would just notice Lincoln on one table, Stephanie Meyer's Twilight on the other. We're in the thick of kind of the vampire fad. And so he thought, well, that'd be an interesting combo. So he decided to proceed and pursue this story of kind of what would it be like if Abraham Lincoln lived in a time with vampires. Also, Lincoln is a real tragic character. While reading this novel, or if you've studied his past and his presidency, Grahame-Smith talks about how Lincoln was really kind of a tragic figure in American history. He lost his mother at a very young age. He grew up poor. He had a lot of hardships and trials and tribulations. However, he is, of course, one of the most successful and influential people of our history, and was wildly loved, and is someone who's studied now quite a bit. So he really respects him and thinks that, his life was super impressive on its own, but how cool would it be to throw some vampires in the mix? So there are several different genres that this novel could kind of fall in. So we're going to explore kind of the different types of genres, what those characteristics are, and how I feel that Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter doesn't perfectly fit into any of these, but rather a blend of a couple of these popular genres. So the first we'll talk about is fantasy, and that's your typical kind of fictional universe. So you think of maybe fairy tales that have imaginary creatures, so like in the photo, dragons or witches or warlocks, gnomes, elves, that sort of thing. So I'm thinking Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones type of books. Also magic and people with supernatural powers, or beings that have supernatural powers, so Harry Potter. Also Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, lots of those type of novels. So we're really thinking about setting when we think about this genre. A related, but not exactly the same genre would also be science fiction. So that's kind of more speculative fiction. You think about space and advanced sciences. So that'd be anyone who's traveling to another planet. That includes also time travel and alternate planes and alternate universe. Also advanced technologies. So your typical flying car or time machine, that sort of thing. These are some classic books like Brave New World, Fahrenheit 451, 1984, some of those books we read in high school. But then also Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is technically science fiction. It's speculative of what could happen if Dr. Frankenstein really could build this being. So those are two kind of related genres that we can think about when thinking of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. The next is historical fiction. So this is more of a novel fiction story that's set in a real time. So it's not an alternate universe. It doesn't include, an alternate plane or a different, setting as far as a fictional universe. It's real life setting. However, the storyline and the plot is fiction. So whereas in fantasy and sci-fi, it's the setting that's more fictional. It's in historical fiction, it's also the plot. So you're thinking about books that were written in a past time. So Gone with the Wind, Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath, the play Les Mis, written during the French Revolution, the Da Vinci Code, also books that are written in biblical times, like different fictional stories that happened during the time of Jesus. Those are historical fiction. And so we kind of think, yes, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter could and have some characteristics of historical fiction. But what I think it really fits best is what's alternate history. And that kind of asks the question of, so what if this really happened? What could have happened if such and such happened? And so that's some common themes that we think about are, what if the Allies had not won World War II? What if Rome had not fallen? What if the Confederacy had won the American Civil War? What would our life look like today if these things had not happened in history? And so you think that this novel really does fit into that, because the question we're asking here is, what would have happened if Lincoln had not been assassinated, which is part of the storyline in Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. He does turn into a vampire, so of course there's a lot of fiction thrown in, but the question here is, what if Abraham Lincoln had lived during a time that vampires existed? And so it's been interesting to think about, kind of this alternate time, alternate settings, alternate plots, and kind of what Seth Grahame-Smith has really essentially mashed up several different genres. And so he has, has been an American or a New York Times bestseller. This has been a very popular thing to do, to kind of mash up the genre of vampire fiction and alternate history. And vampire fiction kind of falls within the fantasy and kind of sci-fi branches of that genre. And so what's been interesting too is to see that there are very trendy fads in literature. And so there's been some criticism about what's popular and, with mass production of novels and one-click purchases on Amazon, there are some, critics who say that this is really worn out, that the genre materials have been overdone. One critic says that these, begin to rot even before they get published and that first page is read, that they have such a short shelf life per se, that they are so overdone and get stale so quickly. But in an argument is that these are very popular. America and kind of our version of, the everyman has access to be able to read these types of novels. And if that encourages literacy and encourages people to visit their libraries and, participate in being part of the literary world, then is that such a bad thing? And so, something that to consider is this kind of indulging in those fads of literature and those genre trends that are happening now. So it's been a really fun, read and to dive into the different types of genre. And so to wrap up, I have decided that Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter fits best into the category of fantasy alternate history as a really fun mashup. So thanks, and thanks for a great semester.